Hello, everyone. Good morning, and welcome to our webinar on sustainability titled Getting to Net Zero. I'm Marian, and the webinar today is brought to you by Edgenta Next. We'll be focusing on carbon reporting for business leaders. Before we start with the content, allow me to first tell you about Edgenta Next. Next slide, please. Thank you. So Edgenta Next is fairly new in the industry. We were founded in the year 2021 as the digitalization arm of Edgenta. Next slide, please. So anchored on our institutional knowledge around facility management and engineering, we developed an asset and facility management platform that we named Assetto. Now, Assetto brings together people, data, assets, and processes to automate operations and improve efficiencies. Assetto aggregates inputs from various sources, for example, IoTs, meters, and other third-party systems, and can integrate with other parts of operations, for example, carbon neutrality solutions or any other third-party systems towards achieving the operational objectives of an organization. Next slide, please. So whilst we started off as the digitalization arm of Edgenta, we're now moving towards growth and independence, providing tech solutions to clients other than Edgenta and also to clients who are not serviced by Edgenta. As we're meeting new clients to tell them about Assetto and our carbon solution, the common feedback we get is, hey, your solution looks good, but we don't even know where to start. So we put this webinar together to share the Edgenta journey towards net zero. We will discuss 1, carbon reporting and its importance in today's world. 2, we will discuss tools which you can use to monitor and track your journey. And finally, 3, how to get the best outcome of the tool that you're using. Next slide, please. We've put together 3 Edgenta stars to be with you today. And to start off, I'll hand this over to Sharifa Baka Ali, the Head of Strategic Business and Market Development of Edgenta, who now leads the carbon neutrality journey of Edgenta. Go ahead, Sharifa.
Thank you very much, Marian, for that kind introduction. Assalamu alaikum and a very good morning to all our audience here today. Thank you to the Next team for inviting me to be part of this exciting webinar. Now, I must apologize to everyone if I cough because I am recovering from a bout of flu. Now, Marian has actually done a great job of framing our discussion today. I'm going to try to put in a little bit more meat and flesh into it. Carbon reporting is actually a very technical topic. It is not my intention to do a technical deep dive. Rather, I would like to just focus in my presentation on why it's gaining traction, what carbon reporting measures, and why companies need to do carbon reporting. And I'm hoping that these will be the 3 takeaway points that you'll walk away from my section of the presentation. All right, let's get on with it then. Next slide, please. So why the hype around emission, the hype around carbon reporting? It all goes back down to scarcity. We have got only one planet. And through our economic activities, we have been polluting the atmosphere. We have been emitting CO2, nitrous dioxide, methane, and these have all actually created greenhouse gases around our mother planet. We have essentially put the earth into a glass box. The greenhouse gases that get trapped is causing global warming. Did you all know that from the pre-industrial days, which is 1800s, up until 2017, our global temperatures have actually risen by 1 degree Celsius. Now, you may think 1 degree Celsius is not big, but that 1 degree Celsius is the one that has caused sea level rises, that has caused floods, storms, and major other environmental catastrophe around the world. Now, apparently, if we don't do anything and we continue to live the lives the way we do, we are actually going to cause our globe to warm up by another 1.5 degree by 2040. Imagine what that would be like then, right? So global leaders got together in Paris in 2016, and they all made a commitment. And they said, we need to put a stop to this. We need to try to work together to reduce global warming to under 2 degrees Celsius before 2050. So that's why carbon reporting has gained a lot of traction and importance to track and measure this commitment made globally. So next slide, please. So let's deconstruct carbon reporting, okay? Now, in essence, carbon reporting is a way of expressing or counting the emission that we produce into the atmosphere. It counts the CO2 emission. There are various other gases. There are about 7 other different gases that are tracked, but all these gases are then translated into CO2 to have one uniform way of measuring and tracking. Now, if you look at the carbon statement that I've actually put out here on the screen, you will see at the header, the year. Now, in a financial reporting balance sheet, P&L, you will have the financial year, which is the basis of your reporting. In a carbon statement, you will have the year, and the year determines your boundary of reporting. Okay, so emission can be divided into scope 1, 2, 3. I'm sure you all would have heard of these categorization in the past. Let's look a little bit at what it means. Scope 1 is really direct emission coming from assets that a business owns. Vehicles, machineries, plants that we operate, the emission that gets released. So that's under a business's control. What is scope 2? Scope 2 is actually purchase emission. The biggest source of purchase emission is electricity. We purchase it from the grid, right? Now, did you all know that Malaysia's emission, the largest emission in its inventory, is actually electricity, because we are an energy-intensive economy. What is scope 3? Everything else in your value chain. The biggest source is your suppliers. Materials that we purchase, transportation used to bring materials into our premises. That's the bulk of the scope 3 emission. It also comes from our employees, the way the employees travel for business, the way employees commute to work. So in essence, carbon statement actually is a statement that aggregates, consolidates your scope 1, 2, and 3 emission into one statement. Now, are there reporting standards? For financial reporting, there's the IFRS, there is the GAAP. In carbon reporting, it's still very new. There isn't a set standard, but there are guidance. The largest guidance is the greenhouse gas protocols, or the GHG standards. It serves as a guide on how to measure scope 1, 2, and 3. Now, who must report? Corporations, listed entities, and guess what? Even small businesses are going to have to start reporting your emission. That's also the reason why carbon reporting has gained a lot of traction. All right, let me show you a simple example. Next slide, please. I told you I'm not going to make it technical, but just a simple explanation. Now, let's start with scope 1, amount of diesel consumed in a company vehicle. Now, the emission is calculated by taking the amount of the diesel consumed by the emission factor. The emission factor attempts to quantify the amount of carbon dioxide that gets released into the atmosphere from the running of that vehicle. So in this example, 247 kiloliter of diesel actually produces 667 metric tons of CO2. It will take roughly 110 trees to be planted to actually cancel out that amount of CO2, just to put it into perspective. Okay, so then what next? Once you calculate your emission, you need to start looking at ways to reduce it. And this is where the net zero equation comes in. Net zero, in essence, is your total emission. You take that, you minus out the amount that you absorb or you cancel. Absorption and cancellation happens through recycling efforts, through the use of renewable energy to power your assets and your plants. Now, will be leftovers after that. You have the choice of planting more trees, or you also have the choice of buying carbon credit. Now, Bursa Malaysia recently launched a carbon credit platform that allows companies to actually go and trade and buy credits to finally then reach a net zero status. So in essence, this is what the equation is all about. Now, let's look at why companies need to report or do carbon reporting. Now, the biggest factor here is because Malaysia has made the commitment to achieve net zero. It has made a commitment to reduce carbon emission intensity by 45% by 2030. It cannot reach this commitment by itself. All of us need to work together to help our country achieve this target that it has set. It's also a regulatory requirement for listed entities. Bursa Malaysia has already made it mandatory for companies to start disclosing your scope 1, 2, and 3 emission. Now, you may think that, oh, I'm not listed, so do I still need to report? Well, guess what? The stakeholders, investors, shareholders are beginning to ask for carbon reporting as well. They want to know how much the business is emitting and what are strategies to reduce, simply because they do not want to be involved in businesses that are polluting the environment significantly. And from a business perspective, it is a way of you coming up with an inventory of your own emission. It will give you a map to show you where your emission is coming from, how much scope 1, how much scope 2 and 3, which businesses are polluting more than the others. It can actually point you to risk in the business. Is the business using materials which are harming the environment? What are areas to improve? It also can be a point where opportunities come up. Is there a way of using green materials? Is there a way of producing green materials? And most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, it is the starting point for your own climate ambition, climate targets, and net zero targets. It forms the baseline for you to know, this is how much I am emitting. If I want to reach the next point, what do I need to do? Now, this is a back-breaking exercise, carbon reporting. I won't say that it isn't. In the next sections of the presentation, my colleagues will tell you how some of these processes can be automated. With that, I end my presentation. Look forward to the Q&A section later, and I hand it back to Marion. Over to you, Marion.
Thanks, Sharifah. Thanks, Sharifah, for the overview. For those who just joined us, welcome. If you missed Sharifah's overview on carbon reporting, no worries. A recording of this webinar we made available on our social media channels. Now let's get to the crux of the discussion today, tools. What tools can we use? I'll hand this over to Alwyn. Alwyn, go ahead, our Chief Product Officer.
Thank you, Marion. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. What I'll quickly do is to share with everybody what exactly do we have in store in Edgenta next, as well as some of the tools that Edgenta as a group is actually embarking on using as well. Sorry. Can we go to the next slide, please? So I think some of the key, how people were thinking of, for example, what kind of tools can we use and what kind of steps do we need to take, especially when it comes to the net zero strategy as well as the net zero journey, right? Everyone usually, or the clients that we typically speak to, usually ask us, what do we do with baselining? What are the tools that we can use to help, right? First of all, that we needed to, when we do baselining, we needed to measure in terms of carbon emission, where are the different sources of emission, what is that are impacting or that are material to an organization. How can we actually automate some parts of this to reduce the human intervention required or the manual data collection that is required? How can we, streamline these processes and make it more effective? And that is at the beginning, how do you measure from a carbon footprint point of view? Then once you have the baseline, or once you've already measured what is total emissions from a group perspective, then we can start looking at how can you set targets especially in Malaysia, we are looking at the government has committed that we will look into net zero strategy by 2050. And there are tools available, right, that we can help with setting of reduction targets, providing trend lines and simulations, and also optimization sort of suggestions around how can we optimize from a carbon footprint point of view or from an emission point of view uh, due to operations, right? And also the company operations. Now, once you are able to plan, you can take action in terms of reduction. How can we optimize from a carbon footprint point of view? Then we talk about the third phase, right, which is about regulatory reporting. How can we comply to Bursa-related regulatory reporting? How can we actually use, a third-party auditor to independently verify the reports that has been generated or the emission numbers that we are claiming that our company is generating. And we are also looking into building sort of like immutable records on blockchains so that once you have reported it, once it is verified by an independent party, and all those numbers will be locked in. You can't edit or you can't change it after. Once all this is done, once you're done with reporting, once you're done with certification, and as my colleague Sharifah mentioned earlier, at the very last step, you could also talk about carbon trading. And there are tools available and there are platforms that are available out there that can really help with all these things. So if you can move on to the next slide. In Edgenta, what is happening is we've actually partnered with our tech partner, Alibaba Cloud, to look into sustainability sort of solutions. And there are three key products that we have sort of developed with them. The first is really the carbon neutrality platform that is built in with automated sensors. We are able to try to automate as much as possible the manual data collection, especially when it comes to electricity monitoring, electricity consumption, business travels, fuel consumption, and etc. How can we actually automate all this data capture onto the platform? How can we do benchmarking from one entity to another entity, from one building to another building, from an asset to another asset, and also how can we look at suggestions or recommendations when it comes to energy optimization for a client. And as you all know, most of the buildings or facilities, 80% of our energy is contributed by HVACs, and we have solutions that can help you optimize your consumption spend, especially when it comes to electricity. The second suite of products is really the product carbon footprint. It's a simple low-code, no-code, drag-and-drop solution that allows you to analyze your entire supply chain, from cradle to gate, cradle to grave, to understand what exactly is the carbon footprint that we are generating whenever you manufacture a product, whenever you produce a product. And that gives you a view and potentially gives you as an organization a competitive edge because your product is more sustainably produced as compared to other competitors, right? And the third product that we looked at is really from a community ESG point of view that promotes green communities or carbon neutrality communities. And we built in gamification to drive some form of stickiness so that it encourages individuals to be able to contribute towards carbon neutrality as well. Earlier, you hear from Sharifah that, scope 1, scope 2, carbon emissions can be directly controlled from an organization point of view, but there is scope 3 where it's typically not in the company's control. They can provide guidelines, they can provide guidances, and this is where we believe that through the carbon community ESG solution, individuals can also contribute towards the organization's effort in terms of going net zero. Okay, so if you can move on to the next slide. This is just to give everyone a quick overview of a snapshot of the dashboard that we worked with our colleagues at Alibaba. This was just a very small snapshot of the carbon emission that Edgenta as a group is emitting. And this, we were only doing it over 2 weeks. and snapshot overseeing three key areas. One is our electricity consumption, two is our business travels, and third is really the fuel consumptions from a company perspective. And we put in data for about 6 months, and also some of the potential reduction plans that we can look at. And therefore, you can see from an overview or dashboard point of view, what is the carbon emission trend line for UEM as a group, what will happen, or from a prediction point of view, what will happen if we don't do any activities versus if we were to implement some form of reduction strategy over the next few years, be it the 10, 20, 30 years sort of horizon. Then you can look at the monthly trend of electricity depending on the different sites, the different divisions that we operate, the carbon emission structure, what is the breakdown from scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Just a note that this is not our actual footprint, this is just a subset, and it is only looking at three key factors. And since then, we have actually worked with our colleagues to input a lot more data. And I believe we are tracking up to about 12 to 15 different factors in Edgenta today. So you can see that we are operating in 6 countries, and it gives us a breakdown of all the different divisions, what kind of emission that is happening from the different divisions, from different activities that are happening within the group. How does it look like? The carbon accounts around what are the number of users that we have registered from ESG point of view, from a community ESG. This is prior to us rolling it out at the group level, and also from a carbon credit perspective, right? What kind of carbon credits that has been generated? What kind of consumptions do we have? And how do we do carbon trading at a later stage? So if we can move on to the next slide. Now, earlier was the overall dashboard that gives people a view of how the visualization will look like from a very summarized point of view. And this is really the back end, right? That gives you the detailed breakdown around the various entities. What are the different scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 breakdowns, the trend lines, and also all the trending analysis. How can we actually break it down and do some form of planning to identify what are the key activities that can be taken for us to plan our reduction efforts. And this really can be broken down into the different divisions that we have within the group itself. So if you can move on to the next slide. And these are the 2 other screens, or the 2 other solutions that we have developed together with our partners. One is really the product life cycle. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of low-code, no-code emission factors that you can actually plug and play onto the platform that allows you to map out what is the overall supply chain analysis, or what is the total carbon footprint that you have when you generate a particular product from cradle to gate or cradle to grave sort of approach. And on the right-hand side is really the application that you can see that can be rolled out for communities, for agendas and stuff, and also for communities that we manage, right? What are the key activities that you can encourage your colleagues to participate in? For example, in Edgenta, we run a lot of recycling campaigns, and our sustainability team recently also run campaigns where you get free coffee if you were to bring in your own mugs, and you'll be able to also, right, from a company perspective, report some of these savings that you can actually generate from all the key initiatives or campaigns that you have run from an organization perspective, on top of the scope 1 and scope 2 initiatives that an organization runs. So it gives a very holistic view from a company perspective, what kind of activities and campaigns that you can run from scope 1, scope 2, as well as scope 3. I think with that, that's all I have for today. Looking forward to the next set of questions at a later stage. Over to you, Mary.
Thanks, Alwyn. So I see some guests have your hands up. Unfortunately, for crowd control, we've disabled the microphones, but we do have a Q&A session after the next speaker. So please put your questions in the chat and we'll address them during the Q&A question. Okay, back to the program. So a sustainability tool is definitely important for tracking and monitoring, but the journey towards net zero cannot end there, right? So the next important step is how to use the information to continuously ensure that your organization is moving towards net zero. So the next speaker, we have Kavita. She's the head of sustainability solutions for Edgenta. So Kavita specializes in asset optimization. Perfect person to speak about this. Go ahead, Kavita.
Okay, thanks, Marianne. Hello, everyone. So basically, I want to echo what my colleagues have presented and spoken about. So basically, although it looks, important and easy to do, but there are key challenges towards establishing this carbon reporting and even using the digital tool. So this is speaking from experience doing this in-house and also offering the services to our customers and clients. So some of the key challenges that I want to highlight here is basically listed here. I'll go through real quickly on the challenges, which might be relevant to you. So one is, of course, collecting and verifying data can be challenging for companies with complex supply chain and multiple locations, such as ours. Currently, in our unit, we are managing about 300 buildings. So you can imagine the amount of data and to be collected and verified. So this also includes the manpower that's required, the kind of specialization and specialty in order to bring this together. Next is that to determine which emission resources to include and exclude, deciding how to allocate emissions from shared activities. So this can be quite confusing and overwhelming. Next is there are different scopes and boundaries that can lead to inconsistency in reporting. So I guess people who have embarked in this will be able to know. As much as it's easy to identify what is scope 1, 2, and 3, however, when you go in detail, the different scopes and boundaries can be can be very overwhelming. On top of that, there's no universal standard yet, in reporting this carbon reporting and establishing this platform. So therefore, with so many reporting standards and framework can be confusing, and most of our clients have difficulties to know where to start from. Next is that time and resources. I think I've mentioned this earlier. The time to collect, analyze, and reporting data can be very time consuming and resource intensive. So what happens is that a lot of this organization don't have a dedicated person to do this. Typically, if you are familiar with energy audits and energy efficiency projects, typically there's an energy manager assigned to carry out these activities. Even at that, it's not supposed to be handled by one person, but should be involved with multiple team and energy team. However, this is in a much bigger scope: carbon reporting, ESG reporting, compliance in much broader scope. So therefore, collecting and analyzing data can be just very time consuming, and you have the right people and right representatives from each unit to be able to help this for the organization. Next is the regulatory. So the the regulatory environment is constantly evolving. Although it's not so much applicable in Malaysia yet, it's just starting with just a mandatory carbon reporting, but with new regulations and reporting requirements, it could be difficult for some of the organization to start this. Finally, lack of understanding and trust. When you don't have the right data, you don't have the right people compiling this data, you can hamper the trust and understanding, communicating your sustainability performance to the market and to your stakeholders. So these are some of the key challenges that I feel it's out there when people want to go into this carbon reporting and implementing this. Establishing the sustainability tool. Next. Okay, so these are just some benefit. Alvin and Sharifa has explained about some of this, but I just want to highlight here again the benefits of digital tool. Although the benefits are just overwhelming, however, many companies don't understand the significance of this. Because one is, first benefits I can highlight here is accuracy and reporting. When you're automating the data collection, it reduces the human error. So it can be more consistent and comparable across the organization. However, I need to highlight, it's not always easy and you cannot eliminate the errors when you're compiling the data. When you're starting off the platform towards sustainability tool, you will be putting in this information into an Excel, for example, the Excel template. So when it's related to having human to put in the data, so what happens, there might be chances for human error. But however, when you transition into the sustainability tool, so what happens is the more you automate, you will be able to actually identify the anomalies. You'll be able to know where something have gone wrong, or if there's any human error, you'll be able to rectify it. And over the time, you'll be able to have less error, and it'll be much more a data with better accuracy. So, and then you can also streamline the reporting according to the proper accurate report. So what happens is, in an organization, especially as big as ours, what happens is that we need to report at different level: top management, middle management, and to our staff and employees. So the platform should be able to help you to come up with customized accurate reports. Another thing is also I want to highlight here is that reducing the cost by automating data collection analysis. So basically, most of organizations out there have multiple facilities, types, source and types of activities that you do in a company. So by having this digital tool, it will actually reduce the cost of automation. So what happened, one of our experiences dealing with clients is that they have multiple platforms. The facility, for example, if you come from a manufacturing background, the facility team will have a monitoring system for the energy. Your procurement will have their own platform. Your management will have a different platform. So when you have this digital tool for carbon reporting, it can be actually streamlined together to make sure all this platform can come together to give you information that can be relatable to everybody in the organization. Okay, and this also goes into validating strategies for the organization. Currently, without any proper digital tool and the proper baselining, what happens is that the strategies are without a basis. So it's given, the strategies are given in terms of KPIs for the staff and organization, which cannot be met, and it's difficult to achieve. So the digital tool should be able to overcome that challenge. Another key thing is accessibility. The cloud-based solution for the digital tool should be able to support any remote access to users anywhere in the world. As long as you have access to the system, you should be able to see it from your mobile, desktop, laptop, or anywhere in the world, as long as you have internet access. Okay, next. Okay, so how carbon reporting helps towards cost saving and increased competitiveness. So one is, I highlighted previously, is a baseline setting. You have, I mean, a lot of people don't really still see the importance of baseline. Even when we do a simple energy audits, a lot of companies don't understand why it's important to have the baseline. The baseline setting is just the core to set up this entire digital tool and carbon reporting. So with the baseline, once you have a reliable data, automated data, you should be able to use the data to set the emission baseline, which can be a roadmap towards a net zero carbon building and carbon footprint. So we do help a lot of our customers to establish the roadmap in terms of how do you address, one is your ESG compliance, energy compliance in terms of energy efficiency, renewable energy, and other solutioning towards going into net zero carbon. And this leads to helping you to identify areas of high energy consumption and emission. So this information can be give you a tangible benefit, which is measurable in terms of implementation of energy efficiency, renewable energy, and other sustainability solution. As Irene mentioned earlier, that most of the high energy users consumption is towards the air conditioning HVAC system. However, there's multiple other high energy consumers in the market, such as air compressors, lighting. It really specific to the type of sector, site, and also the operation. So this will, the carbon reporting actually can enhance all your programs into more tangible benefits from in terms of cost and operational benefits. Next is it encourages business to innovate and develop new technologies. As you know, there's so many new technologies, not in only in energy, but related to sustainability efforts and initiatives that you can harness. You can't go into innovation until you do a proper baseline and you have a proper data to manage and monitor. The next one is actually a very key component that is so relevant to the market now is brand reputation. So going towards carbon reporting and sustainability will demonstrate a business commitment towards sustainability and how responsible you are into environmental management within your organization and to your external stakeholders. So why it enhances the brand and reputation is because it now it has become even a tender requirement in the way you manage your facilities, the projects that you implement, the programs that you do internally and externally. So it's not only in terms of putting your brand out there, but it's also towards compliance to your external or internal market. So when you do import and export of your products, and also it becomes right now we are comparing companies out there based on their sustainability reporting and sustainability implementation. So this brand reputation is now become a really core for you to run your businesses. Next is the regulatory compliance. It helps businesses comply with requirements and avoid penalties. Here, in Malaysia, it's the carbon tax is just still under mandatory. Eventually, it will be mandatory instead of voluntary. Currently, it's voluntary. So it will actually help you right now to set yourself up to avoid any penalties and potentially benefit from incentives and subsidies. So right now, going into getting grant or getting any incentives from the government or even a private agencies, you need to showcase your sustainability standing and also your plan and your roadmap in order to harness in all these incentives and benefits. Okay, lastly, what I want to highlight is on peer comparison. So with this sustainability reporting, carbon reporting, and using the tools, you will be able to know where you are based on your peer and other competitors within Malaysia and globally. So this is just a few benefits that I can highlight, but of course, there's a lot more. Okay, next. Okay, so finally, this is just summarizing all that we have spoken about today and presented. So basically, how digital tools help you to set targets and track progress. So one is, like I mentioned, is customizes to specific organizational requirement. So the digital tools actually can be customized to organization. Some organization is quite small, but it's very energy intensive. There are some organizations less energy intensive, but multiple location and buildings. And also such companies such as ours, we provide different variety of sectors from infra, transportation, energy, building management, so various sectors. So the tool actually can be enhanced into a one platform to customize to your specific requirement. And it also provides visibility and transparency of a company's carbon footprint, emission and environmental impact. So now it's not just estimating, it has to be accurate, it will be validated, it will be measured, verified and audited. Okay. So next is calculate and report on companies' emission from various sources. So the digital tool will definitely be helping you to calculate from various sources, as I mentioned, from scope 1, 2 and 3. And of course, the digital tool definitely, without any doubt, will help you towards identifying areas of improvements, and you can prioritize that action. When you prioritize the action, you should be able to use a specific performance data to get budget approvals. So this is one of the main challenges that we face with our clients is no budget. Why there's no budget? Because you're not able to provide a proper data, a proper specific performance data to your management to request for the approvals. So what happens is that those initiatives become less priority and you have to maybe wait for the next following year to be able to propose for those initiatives. So it becomes mandatory to do those things, but you don't have the right budgets and approvals because you're not able to back it up with proper information. Finally, the reporting structure can be easily tailored to align to business and financial reporting. So like I said, it's not just carbon reporting, but it also ties to your financial reporting, and you can give a more accurate reporting to your senior management and to your stakeholders. So, and then you can set realistic targets. And then when you give targets and KPIs to your staff and to your company, or to help your customers, you will be now set a more realistic targets that are achievable. Finally, tracking using real-time data to identify initiatives towards tangible and intangible benefit. So, I mean, we have been doing a lot of energy and renewable energy initiatives for our clients and also for our internal stakeholders. We have installed real-time monitoring in various multiple buildings, and you have no idea how important it is now that when we did embark into this initiative a few years ago, those information are so valuable right now that we can go into predictive analysis, machine learning, and also those information is now helping us to come up a better tracking in terms of carbon reporting, and we are able to have a set of examples for our platform. So this being said, so I have covered most of the points. So I want to end my presentation by saying that the digital tool and carbon reporting might not be an option. It will definitely be a necessity in the near future. So I'll close my presentation and open for further question and Q&A.
Thank you, Kavita. We've received about 5 questions and we have 10 minutes to respond. But before we continue to Q&A, a quick message to those of you who've just joined. We're almost at the end of our webinar, but not to worry, a recording of this webinar will be made available on our social media. All right, moving swiftly to our first question. I think this question is for Owen. How does carbon reporting tool How does the carbon reporting tool work in context of the platform that Next is building? So how does the carbon reporting tool work in context of Assetto?
I think we are integrating to the platform. So if you can imagine all the sensor information, the meter information that you actually collect from an Assetto point of view, will be pre-integrated onto the platform, and will automatically feed some of this data onto the carbon neutrality platform. So you don't need to sort of reintegrate again and rebuild different adapters just to be able to pass through the same set of data. I think that's one of the key things. The second one is really the platform is meant to be modular based, so it doesn't necessarily have to be subscribing to both the platforms, be it Assetto or from the carbon neutrality perspective. So I think all in all, there is an solution that you can pre-integrate that if you're using our platform already, all the sensor information, meter related information will be pre-integrated. Otherwise, it's just a standalone platform that you can actually look at for carbon neutrality purposes. I hope that answers the question.
I think I just want to add to that, right? So the sustainability platform just monitors and tracks, right? What Assetto does is it helps you get there. It helps automates automates your operations and makes your operation more efficient towards your carbon ambition. So it works hand in hand. Do you need to use Assetto to be able to use the carbon platform? Do you need to use the carbon platform to be able to use Assetto? No. Both are independent and both are integratable into whatever systems that you are already using. Okay, thanks, Owen. Next question I think is for Kavita. What services does Edgenta or Next provide for sustainability?
Okay, to answer that, we are being one of the largest facility management company offering this energy and sustainability solution. So that being said, that we actually offer energy efficiency. One is not only auditing, but actually implementation through our energy performance contracting that provide zero upfront capex for client. So that really helps to to overcome the budget requirement, the budget challenges. So we will provide the capex and implement the energy and renewable energy projects. and then with performance guarantee, energy saving opportunities. And then the contracts are usually between 3 to 10 years. So that is available. So next, on sustainability, we also offer ESG and greenhouse gas emission roadmap. That also includes a roadmap, establishing a roadmap towards net zero carbon building. So these are all the information that we are providing. Hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. Next question is for Alwyn. Sorry, Alwyn, you're very popular today. So most buildings under FM management are owned by other clients. How is carbon reporting done for client buildings? So I guess the owner of okay, go ahead. The question
maybe I'll
is,
just
will the data be exposed to others?
No, because we are, providing FM services to our clients, and that's true that most of the buildings are owned by the individual asset owners or by the clients themselves. We can only provide our contribution or the data points that is exposed to us. For example, what kind of refrigerants that we are using as part of maintenance purposes, and we can share those information that we are using with that respective clients if they were to ask for it. And those will be our scope 1, and it will go into the scope 2, if I recall correctly, or scope 3 as well. So it really depends on what services that we're providing and what kind of information do we have. But if the client requests for it, I believe we are actually sharing some of that information today already with our clients. So from a tool perspective, we definitely can work with our clients to see how we can expose some of those data that is relevant to them as part of our service. I don't think that's an issue. I hope that answers part of the question, because I think it can be quite broad. So yeah, it really depends on what data sets do we have before I can say anything further. Yeah.
Erin, if I may just add to that question, it was a very interesting
Yeah.
question I picked up from the chat as well. So Alvin correctly pointed out the different kind of data points that come out. So for a building that we maintain but we don't own, the electricity consumption obviously is not our scope 2. It will be scope 2 of the client. We are able to actually get all that information, and then through this platform, we can provide the scope 2 information to the client. But then our management activities will involve us coming into contact with different other activities where we will accumulate scope 3. So for example, waste management, that if we handle waste in the building, so the waste will be our scope 3. And then like Alvin mentioned, refrigerant, where we have to actually maintain chillers, air conditioning system. So that's actually our scope 3 emission, because it involves us purchasing material to be put into our client's equipment. For our client, it will be scope 1. Now, sharing of information, a lot of the targets, a lot of your emission, stakeholders are asking these to be published. So these platforms will allow you to actually take the information and publish it to tell people what your emission is and then what your targets are. There's also a need to actually share your information, because your scope 3 will be somebody else's scope 1. So the sharing, no doubt, there is some form of confidentiality on some of the data because it involves your competitiveness. But most of the sharing that occurs is to actually get everybody on one spectrum to see how we can all collectively reduce 1, 2, and 3 of our emission.
Thanks. Always, if you can add some comments to that on data security. If one is using the platform, will the data be shared with competitors or other users?
No, I mean, the platform is meant to be multi-tenanted, and it's all role-based access, right? Even if you're within the same organization, if you don't have the privilege to access that information, you actually will not be able to see any of those information. So it really depends on the role that you play, and from one tenant to another tenant, you actually can't see data from another client as well. So yeah, that's how the platform is set up.
Thanks, Helen. Kavita, this question is for you. For companies that purchase REC, renewable energy certificates, how do we include this in carbon reporting?
Okay, the REC, the renewable energy certificate, through the renewable energy through rooftop solar or the virtual power plant, we should be able to convert the certificate into a carbon credit or as part of your emission. So once the certificate is actually issued under your name, you should be able to calculate that as part of your carbon requirement and carbon target reporting. But of course, there are platforms and also experts that are qualified to do this and to verify this. So from the certificate, you should be able to use it either to sell it or to use it as for your own compliance and for your ESG compliance and targets.
If I may just add to that, if we just look back at the equation that I showed earlier, where you have consumption times emission factor, you produce your what your CO2 level is. Now, where you use REC, your emission factor will be 0. So that means no emission at all. So in a nutshell, it will reduce your scope 2 emission levels. And then, of course, what Kavita said, it can be tradable as well. Oh, we hope that's answered the question.
Sharifa, I'm not sure if you answered this or part of it, but someone's asking about scope 3 measurements. What is Edgenta's largest scope 3 emission? How do we measure it?
Okay, so Edgenta is in the process of calculating our scope 3 emission. Scope 3 emission is actually very, very complex because you don't own it. It sits in your value chain. You need to have a lot of data and you need to be able to work with your suppliers to get all those data in place. Now, we have a view of our scope 3 emission, and the largest source of our scope 3 emission obviously sits in our supply chain at various materials that we use in delivering our services. So we, at the moment, we are reporting on scope 1, 2, and scope 3. We are doing selective disclosure. But moving forward, we are going to be able to actually track all this scope 3 information by the activity. We're going to start bringing it to our reporting and then devise ways of how we can decarbonize. I hope that answers our question. I'm not allowed to say beyond that because these numbers are still being tabulated at the moment.
Thank you very much, Sharifa. Thanks for staying as close to the line as possible. So that's all the time we're at time actually. So if there are any further questions, Jen, could you please project the QR code? Yeah. So we hope that was useful for you. A bit rushed, but if you have further questions, if you want to know more about the solutions, any solutions that we have, if you want to chat further on this topic, just scan the QR code, queuing QR code. Yeah, scan the QR code, and this is how you can reach us. If you cannot scan the QR code, you can also reach us via our social media. And so thank you very much for that. Please do give us some feedback on this webinar. Any other topics you want us to talk about, what we can improve on. Happy to. Sorry, Jen. Next QR code, please. So happy to listen to your feedback, and we'll do better in the next webinar. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Goodbye.